again, you guys can download this file if you want to and take a look at it. You'll see where it says in here that you can set a project. Now, if you already have a project folder set up, this is where you're going to go to set a project for a file that you're going to be opening. Usually whenever I am opening up a new project or opening up something I've been working on, I'll go and set my project before I open up that particular file. And that's going to be, so let's just go ahead and make a new project folder. So I'm going to go under project window, and this will be where we can actually create a project folder. Project folders are going to have basically folders inside that keep basically your scenes folder, any images that you render out. So if you do like a batch rendering, that's going to be putting your images. If you guys, how many of you guys like actually ended up batch rendering the image for this project? So no, you did. You were sending me an email about it, but I don't know if anyone else was. Okay. Did you?
I did, but then I don't know.
Okay.
I would hit batch render, but then it would just render right away, and I would.
Yeah, I was having
Okay.
the same problem.
So with batch rendering, it's actually going to go into the images folder. This has nothing to do with the images issues you guys are running into. Those are probably two different things. But depending on where you set your project folder, it could go into your default project folder, which is going to be for like a Windows computer. It's going to be like under the My Documents folder. Or for you guys, it might be like a library folder or under your documents folder on your computer. You don't necessarily want to do that. For the film I just finished, I had a 1 terabyte Maya project folder. It was huge. So definitely that's not something that's going to go on my main hard drive. So for that, the project folder was on an external hard drive because reasons. So again, you're going to be putting like all of your scenes into a scenes folder, images, going to be having all of your rendered images. Any textures that you create or you collect will go into something called a source images folder. And so with this project window open, we can actually go ahead and name, click new, and name the project whatever we want. And then we can also give it a location. So if I want to put the project folder, you know, on my desktop or on a network drive or something like that, we can do that. And that's going to be where that project folder lives. It's going to sit there, it's going to hang out, it's going to be cool. Generally, I will make a project folder for every project I'm working on. I do not recommend that you guys do a project folder that is called SLR4355 and put all of your stuff in it. I wouldn't do that because stuff tends to get misnamed or written over. Not particularly a good idea. So don't do that. So make a project folder for every single one of your projects. Make a different project folder for every single one of your projects, just to be clear. Okay? So once you make that, you'll click accept, or set the location and click accept, and it will make a folder for you. And then the project folder will look like this. It's going to have all these different folders in here. And so, like I said, source images, that's going to be wherever you put your texture files. So for me, I have a couple of texture files pre-made, and so that's where they're sitting in here. My scenes, I have a couple of project files sitting in here already. And images, if I had images, that's where they'd be sitting in here for stuff that's already been rendered. All right. Now, when you want to move, I'll run into this quite a bit. If you guys want to, say, transfer or copy over the project from one place to another, let's say if you want to back it up, you will not, and I repeat, you will not go into your scenes file, right-click, copy, and then paste wherever you want to put this. Don't do that with just this one file. If you want to copy and back up your project folder, you need to move the project folder itself. Otherwise, anything that's attached to your scene, such as a texture image or anything that's been referenced in, is not going to follow along. That means when you open up and try to render your scene, everything's going to come out with errors because it doesn't have the references in here for the original images. Think of it as, you know, in like Photoshop, actually no, After Effects. Everyone's used After Effects, right? Yeah? Okay. So let's say, where you put all of your media for After Effects, right? You're linking it in there. Let's say you move that folder. What does After Effects do to that project? If you just move all of your clips to like some other unknown location, or just delete them.
It says it can't locate.
Exactly. That's exactly what will happen if you move the scene by itself, the scene file, rather than the project folder, because it doesn't know where the stuff is located. Okay? So, we're kind of savvy on what a project folder does for us. All right. Think of it as like the house for your project. Everything sits in there, and the rooms inside are the individual folders. All right? Okay. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go to File, Set Project, and I'm going to set my project. Let's see, Bryson. Okay. I'm going to go under my C drive. I think is this Bryson. Pop. And then the project folder is actually this, Diet Betty 1. And hit set. Okay? As long as you hit set, it should be good. We don't want anything to pop up. You may get something that pops up that says, hey, I don't have a workspace.mel. What do you want me to do? That means that you may have clicked the wrong folder. You may have just clicked just a generic folder for it to be set to, because it's not seeing this workspace.mel file, which is important. We want to keep that in there. Okay. Now, what happens from doing that is we can go to File, Open Scene, and now what's happening is it is looking inside that Diet Betty 1 project folder, and it's looking at all the different folders inside of here. You guys can see this right here. And so that means I can very quickly go to each one of these and click on any assets that I need to bring in. So that's really useful. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up Pop Demo. Save, don't save. There we go. All right. So this is the setup that I have for the scene here. Now, for you guys, I will expect you to model your own cartons and your own bottles, okay? Shouldn't be that hard to model. You guys all have some sort of modeling skills, right? Yeah, especially Allison. So you guys will be making your own bottles. Be creative with them. Don't make them boring. So with mine, they're just kind of normal bottles, maybe a little obese. Yeah.
Are we going to hollow?
These are actually hollow. Now, what I did actually for this was I made a copy. Now, remember how I said I wanted this to be filled with liquid? So in order for this to look like it's being filled with liquid, I ended up actually making a copy of the model. If you look in here, you actually do see it is hollow inside. But the copy is basically just a solid that I ended up turning into almost like a green glass that then has kind of a liquid property to it. So it's not like I'm simulating liquid, it's just something that looks like liquid. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead and talk about UVs. So UVs, we've referred to the UV coordinate sometimes. That is essentially how a 2D image, like a 2D texture image, is going to be wrapped onto a 3D model. So you guys have been exposed to texture images since you were really little probably, and you don't even realize it. You guys ever see the world map that looks like an orange that's been sliced open? It has all the slits on it. So the reason why that is the way it is because if you literally cut that out, took a sphere, just a ball, and then wrapped it around it and folded it down, it would actually fold correctly onto that sphere. That's what it's made for. It doesn't actually deform or anything. It's made to fit specifically onto a sphere without any deformations. And so that's basically a texture map. So a UV is the way in which we can unwrap a 3D model to have a 2D representation. Now, kind of the gross version of it is do any of you guys go hunting? Is anyone a hunter in here? You go hunting? Do you? Okay. So what do you do with your kill after you hunt it?
Right after, or?
I mean, eventually you're going to do this.
Process, or
Huh?
the skinning process?
Yes, skinning. So the skinning, have you skinned before? Okay. So
My favorite.
it's not your favorite. It's kind of gross, right? So skinning is basically going to be turning that animal into a 2D image, because you're going to be laying it out flat, right? You're going to be cutting up, depending on the animal, you're going to be cutting up the belly, down the arms, down the neck, basically just to try to get the skin off the body and to get it to lay down flat so you could stretch the hide, turn it into leather, turn it into a rug, turn it into Alice's new coat. I'm just targeting you because like you have this funny look on your face, so I'm sorry. But that's really kind of the point of it. So in a way, UVing is kind of like skinning an animal. It's going to become much more obvious when we get to UVing an actual character model, because you're going to be like, oh, this really is like skinning an animal. It's like really creepy. So anyway, let's talk about kind of like what the point is. So a UV, if you guys should just go up under modeling to UV right here. We have a little menu panel that we can look at. What I'm going to do is, I'm pretty sure this guy's already been UV'd, so I'm going to just delete his UVs right here. And we're going to take a look at like what the UVs look like on a model that has no UVs. So if you open up UV Editor and you click on a model, there's nothing that shows up on this UV space. See, we have a 0 to 1 grid here. There should be a 2D image of some sort. Now, if we ever open up, or if we ever create, like, say, a sphere, you see that by default we do have UVs of some sort that come in. We see this grid pattern with little triangles on the top. That's what Maya automatically puts in as an automatic UV. Now that works for the sphere. It gives it something that we can put a map onto real quickly to show kind of how the UVs sit. And in general, it looks fairly decent. So that's kind of what the point is. So we can just map a 2D image. So this is just a little checkerboard I use just to kind of check and see if there's like any warping or anything. Turn that off and on, however you want. Now you will come into what's called seams. Now a seam is going to be wherever two edges. Let me turn on view. Well, anyway, seams are going to be wherever you have two edges that come together. So on this guy, you'll see where we have this edge and then this edge. That's because basically if we have this thing set as a 2D image, we have to be able to wrap it around, and at some point it's going to come back together on the other side. So that's where this seam is going to be. And so if we have an image that's on here, you're going to see that there will be some sort of seam where the two images come back. Now if they don't match up with the same color or the same value, whatever, then you will see this dark line or this stark line right here. The warping I was talking about before, this would be an example of it. You can see kind of this spiral pattern right here. As the triangles right here get smaller, you'll see that the actual shape of the triangles are not actually one-to-one. They're not actually exactly the same. These are more like equilateral triangles where these are a bit longer on two of their sides. And so we're having a little bit of stretching that's going to be happening right here as those triangles are trying to represent those checkers going into the top of the image. So the point of having UVs, again, is so that we can have this texture image be represented correctly onto this object. Now, sphere, it's obviously easy. We can just bring it in, it already has UVs. But with this bottle, it doesn't have UVs. Even if I turn the checker on, it doesn't show anything because, again, it has no UVs assigned. So we have to do what's called project UVs onto the object. Now, under the UV panel, we can create them with different methods. Right here, we have an automatic, best plane, camera-based, contour, stretch, normal, cylindrical, planar, and spherical. Each one of these is going to be projecting UVs based on different attributes. So automatic, it is basically going to tear apart the model into as many pieces as it sees fit to give you a decent UV seam or decent UV map with as little deformation as possible. That's what it is trying to do. So if I click on automatic, you'll see that we have the checkerboard popping up here on the scene or up on the bottle. But it's kind of like a tapestry. It's just kind of all put together in different pieces, or it's kind of just quilted together kind of haphazardly. But the checkers are fairly uniform in size, and we don't really see a lot of deformation, just a crap ton of seams. Let me find that button that gives us the shaded view. There it is. All right. So I turn off the texture. We can see that it's basically taken that bottle and broken it into 50 pieces maybe, but it's laid them all out into individual little UV shells. Now UV shells are going to be referring to each one of these little islands that is part of the mesh. Now depending on where these little UV shells are sitting, it's actually going to change what part of the texture is being shown. Let's see if we can figure out where this one is. It's going to be somewhere up on the neck. Maybe actually on the inside. Here, how about this one? Let's try this. So what I just did is I just basically just found which shell this face was a part of, but just by clicking on the face, going over here, and then focusing in on that face. So it gives me an idea of like which shell this one's going to be a part of. Okay? Basically, depending on the position of the shell, we can see that it's going to be showing different parts of a texture. So this is going to be really important because this means that if we have anything that like overlaps, like shells like this that are sitting on top of each other, they're going to be showing the same exact number. So somewhere else is going to be a number 1 right there, and then somewhere else in here we'll have another one as well. So whenever you're going to be laying out UV shells, you definitely do not want overlapping shell pieces or UVs, simply because you don't necessarily want the same texture to be showing on different pieces at the same time. Now, there might be opportunities for that to happen at some point. Like if you're doing like a repetitive texture, maybe you may want that to happen. But for this project, you want your bottles to lay out without any overlap whatsoever. Okay? Okay. All right, so that's automatic. It technically works, but it's not really what we want. We want something that's going to give us a better, an easier UV map to work with in terms of like taking it into Photoshop and painting a texture of some sort. So we have a camera based, and camera based is literally going to be based on wherever the camera is sitting, and it's going to give you basically a perfect UV map from only this angle. which is kind of useful. But the problem is, as soon as I turn it, oh, that's ugly. Oh my God, look at that. Like super smeared. So what's happening is it's projecting through the model. We're getting the backside of the same projection here. So not exactly what we want. Now, I do use camera base quite a bit, like real quickly if I'm going to be basically like taking like separate faces, and I'll do like a quick camera projection just so I can get them like as different parts, and I can cut it up really quickly that way, and I'll show you how I do that. But it's pretty useful. But this really does illustrate why you'd want to unwrap a model. Is that just by projecting the UVs once, you can tell that this is not going to work. It only really works from one angle. But anything other than this angle is just complete garbage, and we don't want that. Okay? Okay. All right, but that's what camera base is for. All right, let's do cylindrical. So cylindrical is kind of interesting because it basically does a UV projection in a cylindrical direction around the model. Okay, and so as we look at this, you look at the UV map, you can see that it's stretched out quite a bit, but it's kind of like a big box. So what's happening is it's taking all the faces and just kind of, it's almost like taking a can and just splitting it open and then laying it down. Now, it kind of works. Kind of looks halfway good. But the problem is that it's not really truly representative of the faces or of the bottle itself. The bottle has a lot of deformation going on here. The neck gets really narrow. The midsection gets really fat. So it's going to create a lot of warping in terms of the scale of, say, the individual checker pieces on the texture. And we don't really necessarily want that. We would like for the texture to not be warped as much as it is here. This is not good for a texture map to have. And one particular reason is, let's say if you're working on a texture map for a game character and you have a really warped, deformed UV map like this, where you have tiny little textures right here, tiny little checkers, and then bigger checkers in here. If you have a 2D image of, let's say, wood, let's say it's like a hardwood floor. You're doing an image, doing a texture for hardwood floor. The wood panels should be a uniform length, should be a uniform width, right? Generally, let's say 3 inches by 3 feet. I have no idea. I don't do wood floors. So let's just say 3 inches by 3 feet. If you put that type of texture on this bottle, that's not going to be uniform at all, because you're going to have really narrow pieces of wood here. Then it's going to stretch out and warp it as it comes down the bottle. Also, depending on the image quality, you may end up getting a lot of pixelated textures in here also. And we don't necessarily want that, because pixelated textures look like garbage. So, bad thing. We don't want pixelated textures. All right. Let's do planar. Planar is kind of like camera based, but it's going to project it from one of the 3 directions. So either X, Y, or Z. So if we do it from X and click project, it's going to project it down the X axis. So we can see here that it gives us basically a perfect X axis projection that we can then use to split apart the model if we wanted to. Okay? And then Y and Z, same thing, just the other 2 directions. All right? This is really good if you're going to be using like a character model that's going to be like in a T-pose. It's just really super easy just to project down one of the angles or one of the directions, and then just cut them up, unfold them, and you're done. All right? Okay. And spherical. I don't really use this one a whole lot, but basically what it does is it gives you a spherical projection, kind of same as like a cylindrical one, but it's doing top and bottom as well. So you have that if you need to. So you can see here, there's a lot of warping that's going on in this one. So I don't necessarily, for this particular object, I would not use this. I wouldn't. If I had a more cylindrical, maybe like a planet, maybe I would do that. That probably would make sense. But yeah, I just wouldn't use it. In general, the way I kind of approach deciding which UV projection I'm going to be doing, usually it's going to come down to me doing camera-based or doing planar for characters. If it's going to be an object that's going to be more cylindrical in shape, I might do a cylindrical projection, but almost like 90% of the time, I know I'm going to have to go in there and cut it apart anyways, so I might as well just go ahead and just do either a planar or a camera base and just get it done so I can go and start slicing the model up. All right. I definitely would encourage you guys to kind of play around with unwrapping and using different unwrapping methods, because you're going to have to do at least, a couple of different objects that are going to be unwrapped. Since you're going to have the bottle, you're going to have your interior, you're going to have your bottle cap, and then also this box. So you're going to need to kind of figure out different ways to go about it. All right. And just because you do camera base for one does not mean camera base is going to work for the other one, and vice versa. All right. Any questions so far? Okay. All right. You're making them.
Okay, I was just making.
You are absolutely making the models. All right. So let's go ahead and let's do a planar. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and talk about kind of like cutting up these models and kind of the way I want to go about it. So for me, the most important thing on this particular bottle is the label. I want to make sure the label area is going to be nice and flat and straight, so it's going to be easier for me to actually create the texture in Photoshop that can then be put onto that model. Okay? If I have kind of a warped, weirdly angled area that the bottle label is going to be sitting, then it's going to make it more difficult for me to create that label and put it onto the model inside of Maya. All right. The bottle is going to be made out of glass. I'm not necessarily going to be making any like real heavy textures for it, but you still need to lay it out real nicely. But really the emphasis right here is going to be getting that label area laid out really nicely. The carton, for me, the big thing is I want to make sure that all the faces are laid out nice and flat and even. So like this forward face, these two side faces, and then where the handle is going to be, because that's where the marketing material is going to be sitting. The labels, the advertisements, the logo, slogans, I don't know, characters if you want to do them, anything that's going to be printed onto the box is going to be sitting, in there as a texture. So we want to make sure that we lay this out really just as easily as we can. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and cut this guy apart. I'm going to go ahead and take off the texture, or take off the checkerboard. You will notice that this is pink, where some of the other shells we were looking at were blue. If it's pink, that means that there's a double edge, at least two faces that are occluding each other. So if you ever have pink, that's probably because something is sitting on top of something else. Okay. Blue means that the normal is facing towards the projection, so basically the map is facing up the right way. If it's red, that means you need to flip that particular face. It means it's facing the wrong way. Okay? So for this guy, I'm going to start off by cutting out the interior of the bottle. So that's going to be really just somewhere, I'm going to create my first seam where you're probably not going to see a seam in the bottle itself. So let's just say right here. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, double click on that edge, and that's going to go ahead and grab that first edge for me. And that's where I'm going to go ahead and cut this edge in order to remove the interior of the bottle from the exterior, since there are two pieces of geometry that go down inside of each other, okay? Because really, I mean, this thing is just double-sided the entire way. So with that selected, I'm going to go to Cut and Sew right here. And I'm going to click on Cut. If you don't have that sitting here for the UV toolkit, it's going to be a window, because this light can be pulled out if you need it. But if you don't see that, you can find all the tools under like Cut and Sew, and all of this stuff here has all the same stuff as the UV toolkit. You should be able to find and launch it from Windows, yeah, UV editor, not UV editor. It's gonna be in here somewhere, but anyway, UV toolkit is what you're gonna be looking for. All right, so anyway, cut it up. I need to go ahead and move these models off of each other. So what I usually do is just right click, go to UV, or you can go to UV shell, either way, and just move one out from the other. So this is my exterior, this is my interior. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and grab this edge, which if I go ahead and just kind of select, you'll see that it is going over and it's selecting basically this interior edge right here. And it's going in all the way down here to the center. And then I'm actually going to go and complete that selection by going up and double clicking. It's going to select this edge, and it's actually going to wrap around the outside. Actually, let me try that one more time. Grab that one. Actually, let's do, I'm going to grab this one instead. Let's do these two. Basically, I'm just going to be cutting this in half. So I'm just grabbing these two edges. I'm going to do cut, UV shell, move this. I guess no one moved enough in the last 10 minutes. Okay. And so what's going on is we're basically just taking this shell, the top shell, off the bottom shell for the interior. And now we have two shells for the interior of the bottle. Okay. Now this one is red, this one's blue. So based on what I just said previously, what do I need to do for the red shell? This guy. I need to flip it. So I'm going to go to I figured there'd be a flip in here somewhere. Maybe right. Maybe not. All right, I need to go to flip. So that's going to be, I think, modify flip right here. It basically just flips the model. So now it's blue. I'm going to take this shell and let's do unfold. Make this a little bit easier to read. All right, so I'm going to go to the unfold and I'm going to click on unfold. And you'll see that basically just relaxes the entire mesh to where we can, I mean, basically just kind of melts it almost. It looks like it's kind of melting a little bit. Do the same thing here, unfold. And now we're good. So now we have, kind of looks like two deflated balloons. So this is allowing well, I'll show you in a second with the outside of the bottle, but basically we're just laying out the model to where the 2D images can wrap around more easily. And so by unfolding this, that allows like all the creases and all the crinkles inside of the bottle to basically allow the texture to get in there. Okay, by unfolding it just kind of relaxes everything. Kind of like a scrunched up blanket, but like if you stretch it out. Okay. All right, so for this bottle, I'm actually going to go ahead and take an edge right here. Let's do. So I want this edge that's kind of going along the inside area of where the label's going to be. And then I'm going to double click on this one to where it's grabbing this edge as well. These are the two edges I'm grabbing. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to cut. And then this is going to be my label section right here. This guy. And now I need to go ahead and unfold these two pieces right here. So this guy and this guy, these two shells, since these are glass. I'm just going to double click on one of these edges. Click cut. So now we have a seam. Double click on the shell and then go to unfold. And so where I added that cut for the seam, it's this line right here. All right. So if we go ahead and go to the checkerboard, you'll see that the bottle on the outside, so right here we're seeing that the top portion that's been unfolded, if we look at the size of the checkers, they're all fairly uniform. From down here to up here, they're fairly square and uniform in size. It's a little bit different, from the bottom. They're just a little bit bigger, but in general, it's all about the same size, which is what we want. We don't want warping of any sort of texture maps. So that's good. Now down here, again, we have not unfolded this yet. So this 2D texture image is still kind of warping and being kind of stretched across this mesh in a way that's not really going to look very good for us. Okay, so we still need to unfold this piece. So if I go and grab this edge right here, and I go and click on cut, and then unfold. Sorry, I gotta grab that UV shell. Unfold. So now, if we take a look, you'll see that the deformation looks way, way better. Yeah, so it looks way better, looks way nicer. All right. Any questions so far?
When we are doing the UV texture lights to make the other bottles, do we have to redo all the texture for each bottle, or can we just copy the bottles?
So what I would say is just make your bottle, UV it, and then just duplicate it.
Okay.
Yeah. Unless you really want to get good at practicing. But maybe you do. Maybe you do. All right. What I would say here, generally I would like to have kind of a cylindrical kind of layout like we have here for the top of the bottle. But here, since I slid it and the bottom of the bottle is kind of spherical, a little bit spherical, we're kind of getting this almost dress-like look. So what I might suggest is going in and actually cutting some of the edges to where we can actually get it to kind of lay out a little bit more flat, because we are going to see some warping down here because of the way that this is actually being unfolded. So I'm talking about that. Let's bring you up. So if we look at down here, see it's getting a little bit warpy down there. So what we can do is kind of split some of these edges to where when we unfold it again, it goes just a little bit flatter. Okay? And so what I can do is go ahead and grab, and turn off that checker. We have a cut tool right here, and I'm going to use that to basically use it like a pair of scissors and just kind of slice open some of these edges. Just like that. And I'm just clicking and dragging across. And you'll see that it'll cut these open piece by piece. Just like that. And I'm just cutting them up to the same edge loop for each one, so I'm just kind of like following this face loop right here. So that's what I want. And grab UV shell again. And now I'm going to unfold it. It should go ahead and spread these out kind of like fingers. So a little bit like that. Okay. All right, any questions so far? Okay. All right, and then lastly on this bottle, I'm going to go ahead and grab the label and cut that open. So I'm just going to grab one of these edges and cut. And I'm going to tell it to unfold. And there we go. That should be basically just a little band that's going across, and I'm happy with that. Okay. Now, in terms of unfolding all of this, or basically placing it, I want to arrange it within a 0 to 1 space on the UV map or UV grid, which is going to be from here to here and here to here. Okay? Because what's going to happen is I'm going to export out this image with the grids, with the UV shells, and then I'm going to take that into Photoshop, and I can create my label in Photoshop and then import that into Maya and then use that as my texture map. Okay? Yes?
Will we have to worry about distortion?
So, yes, that's kind of why we're breaking this up so we get minimalized distortion. That's why we're UVing it this way.
Okay, so it will matter if it's small to
Yes, it will matter. So generally the way I'm going to be laying this out is I want to try to keep all the checkerboard squares about the same size. So I don't want any like massive changes. So like here to here, like the top of the bottle and the bottom of the bottle, the squares are about the same size. That's what I want. So the label, I want to go ahead and make sure that those squares are about the same size as these guys. So I'm probably going to have to play around with this a little bit. So I'm just going to use my move tool, rotate tool, scale tool, all of those, just as we used them before. And I do want to straighten this out a little bit, because as you guys can see, like this is generally fairly straight, but it's kind of like hanging down south a little bit, right? It's kind of losing a bit of its energy. So what we can do is we can use some tools to straighten this guy out a bit. There is a line and snap tool right here. So the way that this kind of works is we can basically grab like either vertices or we can grab edges, and basically, or well, really it should be UV. It should be grabbing the UVs. But we can basically say, hey, I want you to line up for me in a grid. And we can tell them to align by top or bottom, whichever like selection is like the highest or the lowest, by using these buttons right here. So if I want these to align by the top right here, if I click it, you'll see that they all get pretty much in a straight line, except for the ones that I didn't click. And then it'll just straighten them all out. All right, so that's not bad. We can do a snap to or match grid, which will try to get them to be a little bit more grid-like. We can do getting it to where it's going to align it to, say, either the top corner, bottom corner of the grid itself that we're going to be working with. The match grid does kind of work a little bit. It kind of like tries to get them to kind of like be a little bit more gridded off, but it doesn't work as well, or doesn't always work. So sometimes we have to go in there and just kind of grab all these and force them to work, or force them to line up. So I'm going to go ahead and grab, say, all of these on the right-hand side, and we're just going to tell it to match to the right. And then I'm just going to move across and just get all of these to work. Now you're probably thinking, well, why doesn't he just grab them all and just hit that one button? I don't know if anyone's actually thinking that, but I usually have a question about that. The reason why is if I do that, then everything goes over to an extreme right, and we don't necessarily want to do that. That's bad. Don't do that. No. No. I mean, if I can do UV left line if I want. It's not gonna really cause me any other issues. You can do UV center. I'm just trying to get them in a straight line. That's all I'm doing. Okay. And then I can go ahead and grab, let's say, this edge. Actually, let's do UV. I'm going to grab this edge with the UVs, and I'm going to do line to the top, and then line to the top again. So there we go. And actually, you did not get matched. Excellent. All right, and then just kind of inspect it real quick, make sure everything looks good. Looks pretty even. Excellent. All right, so I need to go ahead and scale and place this. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the UV shell. I'm actually going to shrink it down to roughly the width of the UV shells for the top and bottom, since they are going to be the same width, right? Since the label is going to be the same circumference on all of them. And then I'm just going to move it to, well, I need a little bit of more space. So what I can do is shrink all of these just a little bit, and then move this guy up to the top. this guy down to the bottom. Okay, and we still need to work with these. So what we're going to do is go ahead and bring both of these down. Now, this is going to be the inside of the bottle. No one's really going to see it. It's going to be all glass. It's going to be transparent anyways. So we'll take this opportunity to have you guys seam up the interior of the bottle into one uniform piece. So instead of having two hemispheres. So the way we're going to do that is you will click edges that are matching. Let's not do that, those edges. These edges will be fine. And then we're going to go to sew, this area, cut and sew, and I'm going to click on stitch. And you see how it moved it together, and now they're one uniform piece. Now we do have some overlapping pieces right here. Every time that I do like a sew or a stitch, I'm always going to unfold it again because we have some warping that's going to happen right here where it stretched these UV faces pretty badly. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and grab the UV shell, unfold again, and now it's just one uniform piece. And then it's about the same size as these guys, so we should be pretty good. All right. Need to lay out all of this. Oop, come on. There we go. Okay. I think we go a little bit bigger with these pieces. These are going to be more important, especially the label area is going to be more important since we need a little bit more pixel room for it. So we can get a little bit creative with our layout. So I'm just going to try to fit these in together like a jigsaw puzzle. And the goal is really to kind of optimize so I can have enough space, maybe to give this a little bit more room to spread out. Because if I'm going to be painting like a texture map that's maybe 4,000 by 4,000 pixels, the larger that we can make this, the more pixels it's going to take up, so it's going to have a higher resolution. Okay. So if I can get it up to there, I'm pretty happy with that. Does anyone make costumes? I figured you did.
Yeah.
To me, this kind of has the same or similar feeling to costume pattern making. The way you're kind of like trying to lay something out. My wife and I used to do costumes for like Ren fairs, and so a lot of times she would buy like patterns, and to me they always looked a lot like UV maps. All right, let's make sure. I want to make sure that the checkerboard still looks good on this. Yep, looks nice. All right. So, I'd say that's it for that guy. That is a successfully laid out bottle. So let's go ahead and do the cap, okay? Actually, just let me review real quick. So the bottle, basically we're just trying to optimize the amount of space that we can have for the label area so it has enough pixel room, enough resolution to accurately show the Photoshop texture you guys will be making, all right? That's important. We want to make sure that it's big enough. We want to make sure that we are laying out the glass sections as flatly as we possibly can. Okay, so we're unfolding those properly. And then we also want to make sure that the optimization or the layout in the UV space makes sense. Like nothing's overlapping, everything's in relative scale to each other. So we want to keep that all nice and even. Okay? Okay. All right, so one last thing I want to do is go ahead and select all the UV shells. I'm going to go to Edit. No, what is it? Image. UV snapshot. And I'm going to be actually exporting out a snapshot of this UV shell or the UV shells that we have selected. This is what I'm going to use as my roadmap to make my textures inside of Photoshop. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and since I've set my project successfully, it's going to export it out to my Diet Betty project folder in the images, and it's going to let me put it there. So I'm going to go and call this bottle body UV, and I can tell it what format of the image I want it to do. I can tell it what size I want the images or the image, and I can also do things like edge color, whatever. So let's just do, keep it as a JPEG, and I'm going to do an 8K image, which is 8096 by 8096. That's a fairly good size image. A lot of times you'll hear me talk about like 1K, 2K, 4K, and 8K images. Those are referring to basically intervals of like 8096 or 8000 by 8000, 4000 by 4000, 2000 by 2000, and 1000 by 1000 pixels. Okay? So, you guys probably already understand this, but the higher the resolution an image you're going to be painting, the higher the resolution that texture is going to look in the finished rendered image. So the higher the texture, the higher the resolution is going to look in the final piece. Okay? All right. Apply and close. All right. And that's out. Let's go ahead and do the bottle cap real quick. So what do you think would make sense for UVing this guy? How could I approach UVing this? Cylinder? Because it's round?
It's round and flat.
It is round and it is flat. So don't have any other ideas? Huh? Why? Just a guess, but why would you say guess? Why would you guess that? Well, what does planar mapping do? What did that do for the bottle when we did a planar map? It projected it from how many directions? One. So, planar is actually the right answer. So, cylinder is not the approach I would take, simply because the largest set of faces on this model are going to be on the top. And it is a circular object, but it's really more of a flat object than anything else. And so I would probably just project it from the top and then just work from there. Okay? All right. So I'm going to do planar, and I'm going to do it from the y-axis. and click project. We're done. No, we're not done. We're almost done, but we're not totally done. So this should be pretty easy. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this guy, and what I would want to do is, like we did with the bottle, there is an interior to this bottle cap, and so what I'm going to do is go ahead and click on a interior edge. So this edge goes all the way around the inside of the bottle cap, and that's going to allow me to remove that interior piece from the top, and so we can have two pieces, a bottom and a top. Okay. So I'm going to go to cut. All right, take out the bottom. Here's the top. I'm going to go to unfold. And unfold. So both of these are now unfolded. Shrink them down. And then just arrange these on the map. All right, so something like that. Okay. If we take a look at the final piece, you'll see that by unfolding it from the top, it lays out everything pretty nicely. It's not that complex a geometry, so warping really shouldn't be that much of an issue for you guys. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, you would output that out as another separate UV file, UV shell file that you can then paint in Photoshop as well. Okay. All right. I'm actually going to go and stop for today. My voice is about to give out. And it's 10:28, so we're kind of getting along. I want to give you guys a little bit of time to work on your projects, kind of start coming up with ideas. If you have any questions or anything, you can bounce them off of me. Since we do have 2 weeks on this project, I do expect you guys to move along. Don't wait until the last week to actually start working on this. So for next week, next class period, what I expect you guys to have is to have your bottles modeled and your cartons modeled. Okay? For the project, I would also heavily suggest that you guys go ahead and create an infinity table, which is going to be this. These are nice because they don't allow, or they don't have like a sharp crease in the back to create kind of like a harsh line when you do your final render. Okay? It also just kind of covers up the blackness of, like, you know, the Maya render space. All right? Okay. And so next week what I'll do is I will go over UVing the box, since that's a little bit more of a complex shape, and then we will start making some textures. Okie doke. Okay. Any questions? Okay. All right, so it's 10:30, so go and get started.